tonight in the only conference semifinal series stretching to the distance. Tip off in 2 hours. Tons of coverage of the Wizards and Celtics over the next hour here on SportsCenter. We are with him and team reports from both sides live on the famous parquet. But first, it might be an off day in the Western Conference Finals. Gregg Popovich, though, was going off. I mean, as hot as you've ever seen the Spurs head coach. And it all revolves around one play. You know it well. He says this one on Sunday, when Zaza closed out on Kawhi, was dirty, no doubt. It allowed the San Antonio superstar to re-aggravate his already banged up left ankle, left the game for good. San Antonio was up 23 when this happened. You know it happened the rest of the way. The Warriors rallying for a 2-point win. Pop pointed today.
How much more difficult is it without him obviously against a team like
Come
Golden
on,
State?
man. How much more difficult is it?
I mean,
how would it be if Curry didn't play? How much more difficult would that be? I'm not a happy camper, but that's a silly question. A two-step lead with your foot closeout is not appropriate. It's dangerous. It's unsportsmanlike. It's just not what anybody does to anybody else. And this particular individual has a history with that kind of action. You can go back and look in Dallas games where he got a flagrant 2 for elbowing Patty Mills. The play where he took Kawhi down and locked his arm in Dallas and could have broken his arm. Ask David West, his current teammate, how things went when Jaja was playing for Dallas and he and David got into it. And then think about the history he's had and what that means to a team, what happened last night. A totally unnatural closeout that the league has outlawed years ago and pays great attention to it. And Kawhi's not there. And you want to know how we feel about it. You want to know if that lessens our chances or not. We're playing very possibly the best team in the league. You know, we don't know what's going to happen in the East. And 9.75 people out of 10 would figure the Warriors will beat the Spurs. Well, we've had a pretty damn good season. We've played fairly well in the playoffs. I think we're getting better. And we're up 23 points in the third quarter against Golden State. And Kawhi goes down like that. And you want to know if our chances are less, and you want to know how we feel? That's how we feel. If he would have played and they'd ended up winning, I go get dinner, have a glass of wine, wake up the next day, go to practice, and move on. But this is crap. And because he's got this history, it can't just be, oh, it was inadvertent. He didn't have intent. Who gives a damn about what his intent was? You ever hear of manslaughter? You still go to jail, I think, when you're texting and you end up killing somebody, but you might not have intended to do that. All I care is what I saw. All I care about is what happened. And the history there exacerbates the whole situation and makes me very, very angry. But I'm still open to follow-ups.
A basketball player should have a responsibility for the safety of the other 9 individuals on the floor.
Nobody wants to do anything that would put anybody else in danger for a game or a career. This guy's history is different.
Stuff to listen to. Our Tim Legler is here. You've had a few guys close out on you while you were shooting throughout your years in the NBA. You've come out and said this is not a straight-up dirty play. So you tell me where the intent is for dirty. Where do you draw the line of demarcation?
It's a foul, clearly. It's crowding the shooter, which is not allowed. You have to let a guy land. I think when you start talking about saying that he intended to have Kawhi Leonard land on top of his foot, I think that's taking it a little bit too far, because if you believe that that's what Zaza Pachulia was intending to happen, then you think that every time somebody comes down on somebody's foot, that they must have intended it to be there. And I just don't think you can take it that far. It's a foul, and it was called because he made contact with him, his backside, basically, or his thigh, as Kawhi was coming down. You have to let the guy land. So it's clearly a foul, and they called the foul. The intent to have Kawhi Leonard land on top of his foot, I think that's taking it a little bit too far. There is a history with Zaza Pachulia, and Pop makes some excellent points about some of the other things he's been involved in. I just don't know. When I start talking about intent on a play like that, looks like they're hoping for a guy to land on it. I don't think that was the case here.
Okay, let's kind of manifest this ahead. It's just one play, but it can certainly set the tone or the tenor for a series. How does something like this maybe play itself out in maybe games 2 through, dare I say, 7? Well,
I guess a lot of it's going to depend on what happens to Kawhi Leonard. You know, and one of the reasons Pop's so upset, you know, when you get a question like, you know, does this lessen your chances? I mean, you're talking about, there's a top shelf in this league. Kawhi Leonard's on it with a handful of other guys. Kawhi Leonard is one of the best players in the world, and he affects the game in both ways. And also, with Tony Parker out of the lineup, Kawhi Leonard is the only other guy they have on their team that can create offense off the dribble, where he beats a guy from the three-point line and gets to the rim, and that sets up everything you need to do to break down a defense. They don't really have another option to do that. Now, they can beat you with ball movement, knock down some threes, throw it into the post, but they can't replicate what Kawhi Leonard gives them, which is a guy that can win an individual matchup off the dribble at any time, and that's why Popovich is so upset. So a lot of what's going to happen in the series is going to be dependent if Kawhi Leonard makes it back at any point, or if he makes it back in time for Game 3. Because if he doesn't, they're probably going to fall down 3-0, and now you're talking about an absolutely insurmountable deficit. It might be anyway, because like you said, Golden State is the best team in the league. But San Antonio played near perfect game for 30 minutes.
Game 2 tomorrow, Game 3 Saturday in San Antonio. Tim will be back in just a little bit to talk about the Eastern Conference Finals. We do have a Game 7 tonight. We'll get your thoughts on that in just a moment. Tim, thanks very much. But still, the big story continues to be popping off. Our Spurs reporter Michael Wright joins us. Simply put, Michael, what was he trying to accomplish with that rant we just heard?
Zubin, I've got to take you back to the opening round of the playoffs. This was Pop's version of David Fizdale's take that for data rant, my man. This is Pop rallying the troops. If you go back to that Fizdale rant, when he said that, the Memphis Grizzlies were down 0-2 in the series, and they were overmatched. And right after that rant, it galvanized that whole team and that community. That's what Pop is doing here. He is rallying his troops because they face a daunting task, obviously, trying to play the Golden State Warriors without their top player in Kawhi Leonard, not to mention Tony Parker is also out of the fold. Now, if you go back to Game 6 of the semis, look, the Spurs responded to not having a Kawhi Leonard by beating the Rockets by almost 40 points. So that's what Pop is trying to get out of his team right now. And the Spurs are obviously facing daunting circumstances, but they do feel like they can get it done. All hope is not lost, and I think this is Pop's way of trying to make sure that the guys know that. He's taking all the attention off of himself, off the players, and putting it onto himself because he wants the players to focus solely on basketball as opposed to having to answer questions about what it's going to be like to face the Golden State Warriors without Kawhi Leonard.
Okay, so no Leonard, no Parker, and you would think at least yesterday the one thing they could salvage, get that either, and the Spurs have some big-time problems. That's our Michael Wright, who was there to hear Popovich go off. Now, the question now is Stephen A. Smith. What does he think of the Pachulia situation? He's going to weigh in just a little bit. And the intent of it all, does he agree with legs? And one of the most versatile Golden State guys, by the way, is hurting too. More on the status of that man, Iggy, and his sore left knee. That's all on the way here on SportsCenter. Some salty